I guess good afternoon to everybody, or good morning if you happen to be on the West Coast as well. Today, this is sort of a bit of a reprise for us. We had a tremendous interest in Zero Trust. I think we did something about 2 months ago, and it was a packed house. We have a busy house again today, so there's definitely a lot of interest. So without further ado, let's go into this sort of Zero Trust Data Access webinar, which we think is definitely the new standard for the remote workforce. So I'm Phil Bliss. I'm founder of the Edge Computing Association. I'm a digital pioneer. I've worked with both some of the largest organizations in the business and some very small organizations at some stage. Tom Ward, who's also joining us, is VP of Marketing for QNext. He's another bit of a veteran as well in the tech business, and is like me, has worked with many of the large, well-known names, as well as been very involved in some successful emerging technologies as well. So I hope we bring you an interesting sort of presentation today. So let's dive right into it. I think that sort of the last year has seen, I mean, it was pretty bad in 2019 with 3,813 breaches reported in the first 6 months. But the latest numbers shows 16 billion records have been exposed so far this year, which is just, it's out of sight, really. But obviously, it's connected with the COVID-19 side of things, well, we have to do better in technology on that level, because distributed workforce, remote workforce, whatever you want to call it, it's not going away. So, there's been an emergence of Zero Trust with its never trust, always verify approach, which people are beginning to realize that it reduces risks by deploying granular access policies to prevent attackers from breaching access points on the network. So when it's deployed correctly, I think most experts feel that it can eliminate many of the weaknesses of sort of the kind of legacy perimeter-based security that we've grown up with. I think with the arrival of pandemic contingency planning and the resulting massive escalation of remote working, security surrounding data and remote access is now an even more vital priority. So I'm not going to spend too much time, because Tom, obviously we've gone through a whole bunch of things before we got here, and he's got some great data for everybody. So today we're going to take a look at FileFlex and a lot more. This is not going to be a product, but there's some super data that we've got to cover. Tom, I'm going to hand over to you. And I think, I'm certainly looking forward to the presentation. In my brief run through it with you, it was pretty exciting.
Okay, well, that was a great introduction. And so in my session, I'm going to talk about Zero Trust, of course. I'm going to give you an overview to what it is and how it's applied today to organizational security. It's applied to network access. It's applied to application access, to data access. And then I'm going to zero in on how it's applied to data access technology and how that applies to remote access and sharing. And then after I give you an overview to the technology and the foundations for it all, I'm going to introduce you to our Zero Trust Data Access solution we call FileFlex Enterprise. So our solution was recently recognized by Red Herring and awarded a Global 100 Disruptive Technology Innovation. So recognized as a technology innovation. So with the arrival of COVID-19, as Phil mentioned, we've seen a dramatic acceleration in the shift to remote working. For example, I was talking to someone yesterday and they were telling me that FedEx has 100,000 employees. And before COVID, according to him, he was talking to the CIO of FedEx, and they had 18,000 people who worked occasionally from home. And now with COVID-19, they instantly had 80,000 people working from home full-time, not just once in a while, full-time. So this not only bogged down their VPN, but it raised the concern level about the security protocols of their VPN as well, with so many people on it. And as opposed to the remote workforce that we've seen in the last 20 years, we call this new work paradigm the distributed workforce, because our workforce has been changing. And in addition to remote employees, employee organizations are now using contractors and gig-based outsourcing as we move to more a gig-based economy. And this distributed workforce has been enabled by technology inflections such as mobile devices, VPNs, software as a service, cloud storage, remote desktops, and email. But having the tools to enable distributed workforce has also introduced significant issues with security and privacy. For example, if you provide remote network access via a VPN, that also provides access to the entire network infrastructure. And so that's not necessarily appropriate for gig-based workers and even for some contract workers. So traditionally, we've been using, our cybersecurity paradigm has been oriented against defending against threats. It's a threat-oriented, perimeter-based defenses. And so we do that through the use of antivirus software, through firewalls, through operating system updates, and we enable remote workers through the use of a VPN. So think of a VPN, I think we're all using VPNs. It essentially acts like a super long Ethernet cable into the network. And so it's also a target of exploits and needs constant maintenance and patching because it's such a honeypot for hackers and adversaries out there. And what we found is perimeter-based defenses are not 100%. You know, users get tricked into giving up their credentials through spear phishing attacks. AV software, OS, and VPNs are vulnerable to zero-day exploits. And there's always a time delay between when the zero-day exploit is launched and when the patches are available and installed when you're vulnerable. I could give you lots of examples. I just picked out a couple here. This article talks about how Windows 10 back, I guess it was in March, was vulnerable to an exploit, and there was no fix available at the time of the writing this. This is an article from Ford, March 23rd, 2020. This is an article that shows how with people working more and more from home, there's been a massive increase with spear phishing attacks. You can see it from the chart there. This research was done by Barracuda. Ransomware. You know, there's been more and more cases of spear phishing and exploits being effective. And once inside your network, the adversary will look around for the really valuable stuff like your servers and install ransomware and lock you out. So maybe some people on the call have actually been victims of ransomware. One of our board advisors, he runs a cybersecurity company, and they're hired 4 to 5 times every day to remediate ransomware. And that's just in Canada here. So it's way more prevalent than you might realize and way more prevalent than you see in the press, you know, and you have to pay. Once you get it, you got to pay. In almost all examples. Here's an example of Carnival Cruises being hit by ransomware, and this was just on August 19th. And even the VPN is vulnerable. You think the VPN's okay? It's not. This one example, hackers penetrated over 900, quote, secure VPN servers. So even though they were secure, they're hacked. So our reliance on VPNs and on perimeter-based defenses, it has to change. It's not working. And that's why Gartner says that within 3 years, 60% of enterprises are going to phase out VPNs, if you can believe it. And that's because VPNs trust blindly. Once a user is authenticated, they have effectively gained access into everything on the network. It's like that super long Ethernet cable. You can also let them in your office and let them plug into your Ethernet. And they're also vulnerable to exploits, as we just saw. The new approach to securing the organization versus perimeter-based defenses that are threat-centric is being replaced by an approach that's spearheaded by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, and we call it zero trust. They call it zero trust. And zero trust is exactly what that name implies. It's an approach that always authenticates and always verifies all transactions all the time with a never trust, always verify model. In the zero trust model, no one is trusted, even people who are behind the firewall and on your network. So the goal is to eliminate unauthorized access to data and services and make enforcement as granular as possible. You can make enforcement to the user level, to the file level, to the folder level, to the device level. You know, it's not a blind trust. So what I put together here is the fact that zero trust is based on 4 pillars. And the first is that it's trust-centric. You know, as I just said, you know, we've already seen traditional defenses focus on securing the perimeter against threats. And they depends upon the use of firewalls, antivirus software, and updates and maintenance of VPNs and operating systems. And the problem is that organizations now have data that's outside that perimeter. It's in cloud-hosted platforms of third parties. And adversaries are both constantly finding exploits to the VPN and the OS, and they're tricking users into giving up credentials in order to get behind the firewall. So zero trust, as opposed to granting or restricting access to the network, is focused on granting access or restricting access to data. It's a trust-centric approach versus a threat-centric one. Second, zero trust is transaction-based. So traditional defenses essentially allow access to the entire network and not bound by time constraints, where zero trust, on the other hand, verifies every user, every device, every app for every transaction. And simply because you're on the network behind the firewall doesn't mean that you're not an adversary. So instead, zero trust assumes that everyone is a possible adversary, and therefore it's transaction-centric. Sorry there. And third, it's dynamic and it's granular. Today, our defenses are pretty broad-based and static, and so large groups of people essentially have the same rights and access to everything and remains essentially unchanged. Where zero trust, on the other hand, uses granular-based policies that are constructed based on who the user is, what device they're using, what content they're accessing, and that access can change and adapt on a user-by-user basis or a transaction-by-transaction basis, device-by-device basis, even a file-by-file basis. It's dynamic and it's granular even to the user, file, and device level. And finally, it's continuously monitored. And because today we trust users are behind the firewall, we generally don't continuously track what they're doing. But with zero trust, because we authorize every transaction for every user, we can record and log those activities. And that record can be even integrated into incident management software and aid in management and investigations. So zero trust promotes the tracking of activities with continuous monitoring. So, okay, so if you've stayed in the webinar and you're still here, then you have a very good high-level background on what zero trust is and why you need it. But how do you apply that to your organization? How do you do it? And the first zero trust security products introduced are now called Zero Trust Network Access Solutions, or ZTDA, and they secure the user to network connection. And that's the bulk of zero trust solutions today. It's an evolution of the software-defined perimeter, which will deny access by default and then open access incrementally based on the user. Zero trust network access solutions are account-based, like your software as a service on your public clouds. Or even as you logged in today to the Zoom webinar, they grant access based on the user specifically permitted by IT, not based on an IP address. They're over the internet. They're regardless of location and device, and all access is contextual, making the internet the new corporate network. Zero trust network access is an extension of zero trust application access is an extension of zero trust network access, where zero trust application access, or ZTDA, is essentially a microsegmentation where end-to-end encrypted microtunnels create a secure connection between the user and the applications. So with ZTDA, all users are untrusted and applications access is only permitted by a broker after verification and authorization. And zero trust data access is essentially a microsegmentation of zero trust application access, where an end-to-end encrypted microtunnels create a secure connection for remote access and sharing between a user and their data. Security is focused on granting and restricting user access to data. All attempts to access data are untrusted, and access is permitted only via a broker after verification and authorization of every user and every access every time. So as opposed to cloud-based solutions that you're typically using today, it takes file sharing and remote access to a whole new level. And that's because the Zero Trust platform secures access and sharing from source locations, including on-site implementation of SharePoint. It eliminates the need to duplicate to a cloud server, even to external parties such as contractors and gig workers. So the crown jewel of any organization is the data. And this could be data about its customers, like names and passwords. It could be data about intellectual property. It could be data about operations. This data is the true value of most organizations, and so it thus stands to reason that the prime target of a malicious attacker is either going to be to exfiltrate that data or to deny an organization access to its own data with ransomware. So implementing a zero trust network access platform or a zero trust application access platform is a good start, but ultimately it's not enough. You need a zero trust data access platform that fills the missing piece to protect the organization's most valuable asset, its data. So that brings us to FileFlex Enterprise. FileFlex Enterprise is the world's first zero trust data access platform, and it secures remote access and sharing of on-premises, cloud-hosted, and SharePoint storage. It augments traditional-based, perimeter-based security by always authenticating and always verifying all transactions all the time with a never trust, always verify model, the zero trust model. And it abstracts the information from the infrastructure, providing access only to the data that's being shared, as granular as a single file, and protecting against unauthorized access to the organization's infrastructure. It brings incredible IT control, which I'll get into in a minute, over the file sharing of an organization. And it allows for creation of virtual data rooms, and it's a software-only solution that's very easy to deploy. So FileFlex uses a number of zero trust secure data processes to access and secure and transmit data. They include processes for user authentication, secure data transmission, accessing information, protecting credentials, the use of anonymous tokens, request management, permission management, and it includes a very robust security feature set that includes AES 256 encrypted hybrid point-to-point communications, that edge computing, double encryption, a PKI server, a two-factor authentication, has the option for Intel SGX silicon level hardware hardening, device authentication, virus scanning, single sign-on, Active Directory integration, activity log and operation incident management. And it brings incredible IT control over the data governance of your remote access and file sharing. First of all, it integrates your existing tools, such as your single sign-on, your two-factor authentication, everything you're already using today. It provides tools for management, such as the ability to add and delete users, set permissions, manage the access control list, add storage repositories. It allows IT to assign storage to users based on devices, drives, folders, and even file level granularity. It has very strong sharing permissions that are controlled by IT, where IT can assign sharing permissions on a device, drive, or folder level granularity. And for example, IT can allow access to confidential files, but they can never be shared. So your remote employees can look at them, but never share them. Or they can say, oh, your remote employees they can share them, but these files can only be shared in view-only mode. They can't be downloaded by anyone else. Or they can allow for downloading, or they can allow for editing, or they can even allow for uploading for the creation of virtual data rooms. IT can determine who can share outside the company and who can add their own storage options. And IT can access the logged activities and even export and integrate that activity log into their incident management software. The beauty of building a secure micro-channel access to storage location based on zero trust is that you can use now this platform to securely access and share any storage on the modern hybrid IT infrastructure. That includes your on-premises storage of your servers, all your server attached storage, your network attached storage, your PCs. It includes your cloud hosted storage, such as Amazon S3, your Azure, Microsoft Azure, your Google Cloud, and your public clouds, your EFSS clouds. And it even includes your SharePoint storage, even if you host SharePoint on premises. With FileFlex, you can access and share that storage over the internet without the need for a VPN, and even to external parties without adding them as users or migrating your SharePoint over to the cloud hosted version. It's a software-only solution. It runs from a VM. And it's a software-only solution that you don't have to buy a new server. You don't have to buy any new storage. You leverage the storage you already own and operate. It's very simple and easy to deploy and manage. You can easily scale to thousands of users in a very cost-effective manner. It's easy to use. There's no extensive training requirements. There's no upfront dollars. There's no monthly per user pricing. There's no cost creeping. Once you have a low flat monthly fee. Here's an example of how one of our customers uses FileFlex for its productivity gains, and that's called Land Design. Land Design is an architectural, landscape, and engineering firm with groups and offices across the United States. Their staff had problems when they're on their customer sites of viewing and sharing large files. As you can imagine, they have some very large AutoCAD files, and it's very difficult to view those online with clients. So even with a VPN connection, download and upload speeds were very slow, and that was an issue. And they love FileFlex because it's faster than the VPN connection, and they can view or show detailed drawings from source locations without downloading them first to their laptop or their tablet or their smartphone. Finally, I want to highlight to you that we're technology partners with Intel at the source code level, with Microsoft at the development level, and with HPE and with NEC in Japan. And with that, I want to say thank you, Phil, for hosting us today and for inviting us onto your webinar. If you want to learn more about FileFlex Enterprise, or if you want to start a free obligation no trial, just send me a note to tomw@qnext.com, or you can just put a note in the chat box right now. We're going to leave this on for a little while, so that if you're interested and you want to look at a free trial, or you have some more questions, or if you want somebody to talk to you about it, just put a note in the chat box. We'll leave it up for a little bit. And so with that, that's the end of the presentation. Phil, I don't know if you want to say anything.
Well, I'm just going to say thanks everyone for coming. It's Tom, it was really interesting. We're going to leave that slide up. Tom and I will disappear, but please put any notes, any questions, or in terms of the free trial. If you want the free trial, you can put it in the chat box, and we'll be responding. And in terms of the questions, if you put any questions in, we'll be sending the answers out to everybody over the next couple of days. So thank you, Tom, and thanks everyone for coming.
Thanks, Phil.